dominated by Masons, but is controlled by them in secret. They even model their capital city on the cryptic geometry of the Masonic craft. Masonic icons appear throughout the bricks and marble facades of Washington. Even the laying of the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol was overseen by George Washington, dressed in full Masonic regalia. The gavel in American courtrooms comes from Masonic tradition. And the Washington street grid just north of the White House traces out a star which appears in Masonic symbolism, but which some insist is a satanic pentagram. There is also the shocking symbolism on the reverse of the U.S. dollar bill. America's founding fathers appointed a committee to design an emblem for the infant nation. Ben Franklin, the only Freemason on the panel, suggested a pelican feeding her young. But the idea was shot down in favor of an eagle with 13 arrows in its grasp. And then there is the all-seeing eye atop a pyramid, apparently referring to Egypt, whose images are duplicated throughout the U.S. Capitol. These icons on the dollar are accompanied by 3 Latin words, Novus Ordo Seclorum, a reference, so it's claimed, to a new world order run by anyone from either President Bush to Lucifer himself. Finally, this little trick. M-A-S-O-N. Letters that form both the square and compass of Masonry and the Star of David. More proof, some contend, of Masonic control of our economy and our government. These fears go back to the dawn of the Republic, and they become a political force after an event that takes place exactly 50 years after the signing of the Declaration. In 1826, Masonry finds itself implicated in a murder. William Morgan of New York is a Mason who boasts that he's about to publish a book revealing the Brotherhood's deepest secrets. He's also a notorious troublemaker, now in jail for petty theft. After his arrest, 3 strangers pay his bail, but they cart him away, and he's never seen again.
His abductors were Masons. He was forced into a carriage and driven off, shouting, "Murder, murder." We don't know what happened after that. His body was never found.
6 men were tried, though none for murder, and their light sentences drew outrage when people found out that the prosecutor and many jurors were Masons.
But whatever happened to Morgan, the following cover-up led the people to think that here is a secret government within our government. And so from this unauthorized event, a wave of anti-Masonry swept the country.
As the hysteria multiplied, New York's 227 Masonic lodges dwindled to 41. There was a suspicion of the Masons' secret rituals and the politicians who took part in them.
And you had newspapers established that were anti-Masonic newspapers. And their purpose was to expose the evil tentacles that Freemasonry had spread out into society.
An anti-Masonic political party is founded, and a charismatic leader named William Wirt, a former U.S. Attorney General, makes a dark horse run for the White House against Freemason Andrew Jackson. Wirt campaigns as an anti-Mason, but he finishes a distant third to Jackson and another Freemason, Henry Clay. Wirt dies in 1834, and the anti-Masonic frenzy subsides. American Masonry recovers from the Morgan episode. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, it expands, reaching a peak after the Second World War. It also flourishes in Britain and Western Europe. But the eerie rituals and symbols continue to make Masonry a target for dictators and demagogues, popes and prelates, men jealous of their power and suspicious of their secrets. In America, Freemasonry no longer excites much interest. But some still insist that there is a network of godless conspirators bound to a death pledge who infiltrate the institutions that run the world.
They're basically running a racket, right? They're racketeers, essentially. They're cutting corners. They're favoring each other. They basically think they made the country, it's theirs, and they're above government. They've basically appointed themselves, and people have to decide for themselves if they want that to continue.
Beneath the conspiracies, behind the symbolism and secrecy, we reveal at last the truth of the Freemasons. Are they an ancient order? Or a shadow government? A harmless social club? Or a satanic cult? What is the reality behind the Masonic conspiracy theories? It turns out there is less here than meets the all-seeing eye.
If it were a secret society, many of us would not know about it. I mean,
good heavens, we're in the Yellow Pages. We put bumper stickers on our car.
Despite legends that suggest an ancient past, the Freemasons are a modern phenomenon. What began as stonecutter guilds in the Middle Ages evolved into progressive social clubs by the 18th century, and they employed the tools of the construction trade as metaphors for building a better society based on equality and moral conduct. Their knowledge of geometry and engineering makes them leading thinkers at a time of free thought and political change. But their symbols and secrecy make them suspect to kings and churches who don't like secrets or political change.
Maybe they see this as part of a conspiracy and they're going to look for villains. And Freemasons make great villains.
But in reality, their rituals are harmless and their symbols no more ominous than a company logo. Some symbols attributed to the Masons aren't Masonic at all, like the Great Seal of the United States. The all-seeing eye above the pyramid is not Masonic, nor were the people who selected it.
A committee was formed by the Congress just after the Declaration of Independence was signed. The first three members were John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. Only one of those three men was a Freemason, and that was Benjamin Franklin.
Franklin suggested several designs, none of them involving an eye or a pyramid. Non-Masons chose that design. The pyramid is unfinished because it signifies a solid foundation for a country that's always a work in progress, under the eye of Providence. It doesn't refer to Egypt because Masons didn't build the pyramids. That's a myth. If the Great Seal were a symbol of America's founding Freemasons, it would have appeared on the dollar long before it did. In 1935, under President Franklin Roosevelt.
Henry Wallace, Roosevelt's vice president, thought that the Great Seal was a Masonic emblem. And he suggested to Roosevelt, who both of them were Freemasons, that it would be nice to put this on the back of the dollar bill.
The words Novus Ordo Seclorum do not mean New World Order, but rather a new order of the ages, referring to the first modern democracy. And as for the parlor trick of finding the word Mason on the Great Seal, that's all it is, a trick. Likewise for the satanic pentagram supposedly formed by the streets of Washington.
There are some conspiracists that believe that the Freemasons made some kind of satanic symbol just north of the White House with a pentagram. But the pentagram's not even complete. Rhode Island Avenue doesn't go all the way to Connecticut. If we're so darn powerful, how come we couldn't make a complete star?
Nor did the Freemasons build Solomon's Temple. That's a story invented by the Scottish Rite Lodges. The temple's designer, Hiram Abiff, is mentioned in the Bible, but only briefly, and there's no account of his murder.
It's a purely Masonic myth, and it's a Masonic myth that we can trace back quite a long way. So he's a personification of a belief system.
The Templar Knights were based in the ruins of Solomon's Temple, but they found no secret knowledge. They didn't go into hiding when they were disbanded. And they didn't resurface as the Freemasons. Nor did they ignite the French Revolution.
It's a claimed heritage, it's a legendary heritage, but I can't give you any historical evidence to support it, but it's a lovely story.
The two pillars of knowledge in Rosslyn Chapel were never found in Solomon's Temple. The Templar Knights never came here. And while Rosslyn's builder was William Sinclair, it wasn't this William Sinclair, the Masonic Grand Master. Rosslyn was built by his ancestor 3 centuries earlier, in the 1440s, before the Freemasons were formally established. The Catholic Church opposed Masonry because churches didn't like secret organizations, period, and they objected to Masonic support for democracy and church-state separation. These ideas did, however, make them popular with America's founders.
The whole American experiment is in part about separation of church and state. That at one time was a very radical notion.
Among those radicals were those who threw the Boston Tea Party. But was it a Masonic plot?
The Boston Tea Party was planned in the Green Dragon Tavern. Indeed, the Freemasons were involved, but so were the non-Masons. Every man that was in the tavern that evening was pressed into service.
The group responsible was the Sons of Liberty, only some of whom were Masons. Only 9 of the 55 signers of the Declaration of Independence, and only 1 out of 3 American presidents are known Masons. Neither of the Bushes are Masons. And Yale's Skull and Bones Club has nothing to do with the craft. Consequently, the senior Bush's service at the UN and the CIA had nothing to do with the fact that a Freemason, Harry Truman, established those institutions. As for claims that the Masons are a murderous cult, if there's no age-old conspiracy, there's no need to kill for it. William Morgan's disappearance was the work of renegades. It was not an official act. The shooting death of William James in New York was an accident, not a Masonic rite. As for the idea that Jack the Ripper murdered 5 prostitutes to protect the reputation of a Masonic prince,
everything you've read about Freemason links to Jack the Ripper is the work of fiction.
At the time, no one suggested a Masonic plot. That theory wasn't concocted until the 1970s, and it was based on an admitted hoax.
According to a book which came out in 1975, The Ripper File, these 3 men, Jubilar, Jubilo, Jubilum, were referred to collectively as the Jewes, J-U-W-E-S, the way the word Jews was misspelled on this wall. That's complete fiction.
In Masonic lore,